how do we practice getting comfortable with that energy of endings in our lives? And we have this opportunity every winter.
I often used to think of winter as this big block of a season, and actually so much is changing from week to week. Not everything is dying. There's a lot of new life happening at the same time, but to realise the cycles and the shifts that are happening is really powerful.
And it's in that emptiness or nakedness or void that the new possibilities can begin to imagine themselves under the ground of our lives or deep inside the quieter parts of ourselves.
Welcome, dear one, to this new episode. We have launched The Rhythm, and a really wonderful global group is gathering. We hold sessions on set days weekly to meet and meditate. I share practices that build resilience in your nervous system, that bring stillness and creativity to your brain, and we offer the practice in sacred activism. It would be wonderful to share these with you. They are live online, so we can actually see each other's faces and share these beautiful, potent moments together. One of the things I love about the internet is being connected to so many of you across the world, and I want to replace as much text pings and likes on social media with face-to-face moments. This is part of the reason behind this offering, to make our screen together more intimate and more connective. You can find the link in the show notes for The Rhythm. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, as we're past the summer solstice, it means that we're already in the process towards winter. And for those in the Southern Hemisphere, you're in the midst of winter. And of course, we all have periods of winter in our lives in the much bigger sense of the term, when we're forced into darker and more challenging times. I've just myself experienced a big inner expanse from being so present to a deep winter phase the past few years, and feel so much of the richness of the human experience is living in the seasons in their full spectrum, both the seasons of our lives and the seasons of the weather. This is a beautiful episode that was recorded in a circle with a group called the Wilder Kin that I spent my last winter gathering around the fire with on some very beautiful land. We do speak of genocide, and this was a few months ago before things ramped up even more. Our hearts are with all of those that are experiencing such violence and injustice in their lives. The Wilder Kin are a collective of 5 friends and facilitators rooted in regenerative practice, nature connection, and soulful community. They met during a 6-month nature-based residency at Wild Things Farm, which is 25 acres of rewilded land in Pensford, near Bristol in the UK, where they formed deep bonds through ceremony, nature connection, and shared longing for slower, cyclical ways of living. From that seed grew Wintering, a 3-month journey for a small group to gather around the hearth on rewilded land and explore what it means to winter in these times. Held between Sarwain and Imbolc, weaving ritual reflection and reciprocity with the more than human world. Through silence and story, composting and dreaming, the Wilder Kin are here inviting us to remember how to be well in the darker seasons together. You will hear from, in the order that they speak first, Jessica Farrow, who you know from episodes 133 and 187, who is a sustainable business mentor, nature-based facilitator, and mother, walking the path of cyclical living and soulful enterprise, including Kindred Village. Sally Wilding, who is the steward and guardian of Wild Things Farm, the Biodiversity and Community Connections project where we met, working in partnership with wild beings across the land to regenerate natural systems and human souls. Juliet Dale, who is a co-founder of Satori Organizational Development, working at the intersection of inner and outer change and also regathering. Heather Knight, who is the founder of Arteri, a design studio that connects us to stories of hope and inspires collective action. And Ella Saltmarsh, who creates culture that supports all life to have a safe future. She is the director of the Culture Initiative, which houses projects like the Long Time Project and Inner Narratives, and she hosts the Long Time Academy podcast. In this episode called What Winter Knows, Tending to Endings, we explore the question, what does it mean to winter, deeply, wisely, and together? We hope that you enjoy this episode and that it lets winter change you in powerful ways. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Tala Oak. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies, to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams, and we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. It is an absolute delight to be here with the five of you on this beautiful land, Wild Things Farm, to share in this journey of wintering. And it's been a really beautiful and powerful experience for me to be able to join you and to be part of a really beautiful and tender journey through the darkness of the year, and to be held in community and to be on this beautiful and deeply loved land where there are oak trees and there's a spring and birds and planes and everything else that you might find on a beautiful piece of land where we come together. And the five of you created this invitation for some of us to come and journey with you. And I'm really delighted to be able to share more of this journey and what it means to winter and why it's important, how it changes us, how it shapes us, to be aware of the seasons and to be really living with all of life as all of life is. Jessica, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself and to share first.
Thank you, Amisha. Thank you so much for having us all here. Yeah, I'm Jessica, and I work at the intersection of sustainability, business, nature connection, and also increasingly working with mothers as well to explore the motherhood journey. And wintering, since working in the business world for 15 years or so and working with businesses on their sustainability programs, it's become clear to me that even when people are working on issues like sustainability, trying to make better decisions, trying to lead to a better future, it's clear to me that a lot of people are making those decisions from a place of deep disconnection with nature, a fundamental lack of understanding of how nature works, which is working in cycles. We're so used to working in this dominant linear system that doesn't allow time for rest, doesn't allow time for processing, doesn't honor the different parts of the cycle and how they're important in their own way. And this pattern shows up again and again in our world. Pretty much most places we look, we're just collectively terrified of death, of darkness, of endings, and it shows up in motherhood. We're not able to support people through the darker times of motherhood in, I don't think, very effective ways. We don't honor the transitions in our lives through the different phases of our lives adequately. And so we struggle. We reach, in my case, it was motherhood. Becoming a mother was a huge initiation for me, and not feeling held in that process by the collective for various different reasons led to a kind of dark night of the soul. And I think it does for a lot of people. So really just joining dots between all these experiences and really feeling that need for that deep connection to nature. And wintering is just this overlooked season. Like, winter is often, how many times do we say, oh, I just can't wait for it to be warm again. I just can't wait for the summer to come around. I can't wait for my holidays. Oh, this dark weather, it's so horrible. It's so wet. And, we even say this weather is miserable. This weather is horrible. It's so loaded, the way we talk about the winter season and the dark. And our idea of coming together to do this winter experience and offer this wintering experience came from our own, the five of us, a deep need to connect more with the land, connect more with nature. And really that kind of wider exploration of what would it be like to actually lean into some of this discomfort? What would it be like to lean into doing things differently rather than the ways that we might have been taught or learned from our dominant culture? What if we really honored winter and changed the way we experienced it? And I think so often when we think about wintering, we think about hibernation. A lot of people say, oh yeah, I go into hibernation mode in the winter. And I think that's goes hand in hand with, in lots of people's mind, with solitude. But what we really wanted to create here was a way of wintering together in community. I think that's so different and so unusual, but actually it's probably more aligned with what our ancestors would have done, where being driven indoors in colder climates and colder weather would have actually meant a more collective experience, a more intimate experience together inside, dreaming together, working together in much more closer proximity. And I think that's what we really wanted to get to experience in this wintering journey, coming together in nature, but also cozied up inside in a yurt, beautiful, cozy yurt that we've got here, and really exploring what it means to winter together in community, and also with the wild beings on the land, and really watching the seasons change.
Thank you, Jess. My name's Sally. I think of myself as the kind of human sort of married to this land and being here in service of all of the life that's here, all of the wild things that are here. So I've been on a path for many years, longing and hunting down the way that I could be helpful in the world, a longing for that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, and a searching for how I could contribute to that. And in the last decade, I suppose, that has really become a deepening into the interconnection that we have with all of life, and a feeling of growing deep belonging with all of life, and in relationship with this land and its beings, especially feeling that I could be a bridge or a channel for more humans to experience that. One of the things that we all need more than anything, and often miss more than anything, is that feeling of belonging. And the belonging that I found here has, or with the family of species, as it were, has given me a safety that I hadn't ever experienced before. And then to wintering and to being in community in different ways through the seasons here, and with these wonderful 4 women who came together to co-create our wintering journey, it felt a really incredible opportunity to step together into exploring many of the things that winter, not just as a natural season of the year, but as a representative or an embodiment really of so many aspects of ourselves and our lives and our humanity that we often avoid or push away or marginalize or feel a longing for but can't get to. I'm thinking really of how winter as a season can also represent difficult feelings like grief, experiences of loss, experiences of being stripped back to kind of bare, naked vulnerability, experiences of growing older and elderhood, of having to slow down, and how much we avoid slowing down in our culture, how much we don't value rest and the importance of rest in the cycle of productivity and doing and achieving and succeeding. So it was a beautiful opportunity to explore that in that cold and dark season when we really feel it tangibly and viscerally, but also being aware that wintering can be something that we can apply to different points of the year or different points of our lives or different experiences or different parts of ourselves that want tending to and rarely get space. And as Jess said, we need each other to go to these places. We need each other to tend to those most painful of experiences or lessons so that we can emerge through that with the kind of the gold of the insight and wisdom that we can gain and the healing that we can feel from being with each other through those more like authentic, truthful experiences of being human. Yeah, we need each other. And so it was the most beautiful thing for me to have the chance to bring this together with others in a co-created journey. That was, for me personally, a very special thing, having done a lot of offering things, just myself offering things. So I'm so grateful to all of you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Hi, everyone. I'm Juliet. What I focus my time and energy and life on at the moment is helping people to raise their awareness of who they are and where we are at this time with so much going on in the world, and developing people's capacities to respond. And some of that is with organizations. Some of that is in settings like this on wintering, reaching more broadly to people in the community. I mean, to give a little bit of draw a thread to how we all came together, we had already been recipients of an offering from Sal and some other wonderful people on this land. And for me personally, what that opened up was experiencing all the different ways of knowing through being in deep connection with others, having time by myself in nature, and developing a relationship with the more than human species on this land. And so we continued that thread in relationship together here, and we're looking for, I guess, a reason beyond those wonderful reasons to continue. And there was a deep drive within us all to invite others into this experience. And so wintering was born. And for me personally, winter used to be my favorite season when I was little. The cozying up, the hot chocolates and snuggling around with people I love and being warm together. As I've lived through parenting two beautiful children, it's taken on a whole other dimension of intensity and busyness, and being a working mother, raising a family, and trying to live the life that you think you want to live. And I just realized that that's just going so against everything that we have, is in our DNA, everything that nature is calling us to do at this time. So for me, one of the big draws of creating this space to winter together and explore what that means to us was to really just stop and slow down and let go of things I felt I was holding on to that need to be composted, and that they may have served me well and they may not have served me well, and I need to go through a process of discovering new ways of being. So for me, that death and process of renewal and new life coming out the other side of wintering has been really central as to, why we're here together. I think the beauty of the experience has been that people coming together with us to journey through the winter with us have all had totally unique, different reasons for doing that. And yet wintering has created a container that is broad enough for us to collectively grow, learn, and transform together. Yeah.
Thanks, Juliet. Hi, I'm Heather. I've come to wintering through a long journey from burnout about 10 years ago, and trying to find my way back to myself through nature's rhythms. And I'm a designer. I was at a creative agency where everything was very urgent, lots of ASAP deadlines, constant stress, late nights. And I was also I was doing a lot of campaigning on big global issues, and it just felt so big, and I wasn't sure if I was really making an impact, and I got really burnt out. And I found my way back to myself through spending time in nature, and decided to create a creative studio that was all around a reciprocal relationship with nature, one that can create the conditions to flourish, because I felt like my creativity had completely disappeared. So how could I be in service to life through what I do? Yeah, I found my way onto this original offering on this land. At that point, I'd really understood how powerful it is to spend time alone in nature, to process, to pay attention to what's happening within myself, what's happening in the world around me. Because without that spaciousness, I wasn't processing things. And yeah, having that time here on the land, just realizing that so much processing can happen around a fire, under an oak tree with others. It felt like a big outward breath at the end of every week. And I realized that we didn't have that in our culture. And like Juliet was saying, Christmas and December everything has to be done by Christmas. And we wanted to create something that was a real antidote to that was slowing down, that was rejecting that fast pace, consumer, capitalistic drive for more. Yeah, we wanted to offer this out to more people so that more people could experience what we had. And knowing that there's a number of people that work really well around a fire, we had a call out for people in a local region to us to join us. It was just amazing how many people wanted to join. People from all around the world responded who couldn't make it. It's too far to travel, but we really got a sense of how needed this space is to gather in community in winter and process what is happening within us and outside of us. In the end, we could only pick 15 people. I'm hoping more wintering groups will emerge. It was a real opportunity to get to know people on a really slow, deep basis as well. There was a lot of life shifts happening, a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And just to witness what was happening through everyone's lives together, it's like therapy, but not everyone can afford therapy. If everyone had a therapist, there wouldn't be enough therapists. And we have to learn how to support ourselves in community, to hold ourselves in the highs and the lows. And we're going to need to learn how to support each other even more as things get more uncertain or chaotic. And also learning that the land can hold us, and that stillness, we can hold ourselves in that place as well. It was a wonderful time to just be really messy in our experimentation and try things we've never tried before. And I don't have a facilitation background, but holding some weird and wonderful activities, it felt like a playground of messiness, and we laughed a lot, which is also a great way to get through winter. And what I think about when I think about our wintering journey is so much warmth. I think I'd also spent a lot of winters nesting in, and to realise that it's such a beautiful season when spent together, singing songs, eating together, noticing all the tiny shifts. I often used to think of winter as this big block of a season, and actually so much is changing from week to week. Not everything is dying. There's a lot of new life happening at the same time, but to realise the cycles and the shifts that are happening is really powerful.
Thank you. My name is Ella. And as we're hearing, there are many layers to wintering, and I guess like many layers to why we winter. I think the first layer is the relentlessness of capitalism. So many of us in the work that we do are about building other systems, more life-giving systems, fairer systems. And yet we're doing that with the mindsets and the habits of the status quo. We're doing that with the habits of the systems we're wanting to retire. It takes great intention to shift that. And relentlessness is one of those habits, forever productive. That is the aspiration, always on. And we understood that wintering was an opportunity to be living the world we want to see, be living the life-giving systems, be creating it now. So that's one reason why to winter. And then there's the darkness. And, we were wintering at a time of genocide, of authoritarianism, of climate and nature collapse. Wintering enables us to face into the darkness, to be with the decay, and to do that together, rather than to turn away from that alone, which is what ends up happening so much of the time because it's so overwhelming. And if we don't have other people to face into it with, then the instinct is to turn away, to put our heads down, and just to try and plow on through, which isn't going to serve us or the world. And so there was something about how do we create a space where together we can face into lots of different kinds of darkness, like actual darkness of the days getting shorter, and then the darkness of the world. And then there's something about time. And so I run something called the Long Time Project. I am quite obsessed by time. So one of the wonderful things about co-hosting wintering was in this conversation, it all sounds kind of quite cerebral, but actually a lot of the work of hosting was super practical, like we did when we were preparing for the podcast just now. We sweep the floor, we light the fire, we light the candles, we make sure the food is all ready, we make sure that there is tea on the stove, and we make sure that the fire is lit. That we called ourselves the hearthkeepers. I think it was the first or second session, and we as hosts get there a bit early so that everything is prepped for the participants. And we get there and we've allocated times for these tasks, and we allocated some time for the fire making, but the fire was really slow. It was really, really slow to light. And by the time, it was a very cold day, and by the time everyone came and arrived to winter, like the fire wasn't big. It wasn't big enough to keep us warm. And it was okay. Like we kept going. And then afterwards, in the reflection, we realized that one of the things that had been happening was that we'd allocated the amount of time it took to make a fire in summer to winter. And actually, it takes a lot longer to make a fire in winter, that we're in winter time, that time is different. And there was something about us being able to enter into this winter time where things don't work the same way they do as they do in the summer. And what does it mean to explore that together? And so I loved being in this kind of very lived, visceral, practical experiment around how is it to experience time differently. And then kind of linked to some of these big things we're seeing in the world, thinking about what can we learn from our more than human kin about how to do the work of composting. So we know we need to compost lots of these systems that aren't serving us, but what does it mean to like really pay attention to the act of composting? What can we learn from the oak about composting? What can we learn from the soil? What can we learn from the worm? How can we listen to them so that we can be much more than the sum of our parts when it comes to both what we want to compost in the world, but also like what can we learn about nurturing nascent things? What can we learn about growth from, as Heather described, like paying closer attention to what's happening? I really echo what Heather was saying about before wintering, I'd go out in the winter and I'd see a bleak landscape. I'd see an empty landscape. I'd see a landscape denuded of leaves and that's all I'd see. And then when we were wintering with intention, I saw so much, it wasn't that bleakness. There was so much happening each time and it was so different. And so really paying attention to what can we learn from the natural world around us about both how to be in the darkness and how to help these transitions that we need to make felt really important. And then for us, something that was really important was that the process filled each of our cups, that as hosts, we weren't depleting ourselves through our hosting. And before we even designed the program, that was one of our design principles. This has to be regenerative for us. And I think that, for me anyway, was really revolutionary to be like, what does it look like to kind of hold for others in a way that doesn't deplete? What does it look like to really be in collective and to turn up as you are, which will sometimes be really strong and energetic and inspired, and sometimes will be quite broken and tired and empty. And that when you're being in community, that's okay. Because when I'm broken, someone else will be whole and vice versa. And so it was a real privilege to be so collective in what we were offering to the collective.
It's so powerful. There's so much about these times that we're in, and this time has been called many things, including the long dark. What does it mean to live at a time where so much around us is revealing its shadows and showing us that we can't continue in this way, when so many of the systems that are imperfect but still have been holding us to some extent start to collapse more and more, and we're in it, we're living it, and it's not like an Armageddon. It's like everything becoming harder, the day-to-day becoming harder, it being harder to get treatment for a medical condition, it being harder to buy your groceries, like it being harder to find friends that have time because people are under more pressure. Just all of these small ways that systems collapse kind of creeps up on us, and we find ourselves less resourced. And I feel that in these times, we have to really remember what it is to support and hold each other in the dark, and to be that collective fire and to light the way for each other as and when we need it. And it's really such an important invitation to come out of this individualism that we've been led into and we've come to realize doesn't really give us what we need. And there's so many contexts that we can reflect in that on, like, even the way that we view like therapy. It's like, okay, you're struggling, what's wrong with you? And it's like, what about just needing a hug and a nice meal and to sing some songs around a fire with people that care about you? Maybe you don't need to go and take pills or find out what's wrong with you. And there's a lot about the culture that we're in right now that takes us into this place where there's so much responsibility on everyone to kind of to try and do everything and figure it all out on our own. And then that compared with like this social media culture that we have of presenting a different part of our lives always. Not, because of course, like there's things that you wouldn't take a picture of. Like it's not like that anyone's even trying to kind of hide anything. It's just a natural thing of when you're seeing so much of the people who you care about through that lens rather than actually just being together. And for me, I felt being invited into the wintering journey was so powerful because it is a time where naturally people go inwards and stuff comes up and stuff moves, and to kind of have these touch points that brought people out and together and to be part of something where if you weren't there, you were missing, or, and there was a sense that there was like so much care, and to be witnessed in those parts that are ickier, so different to that summer energy when everyone's like out and excited and the roses are in bloom and, there's like a celebration energy, and it's so different to be met in that space where the barrenness is present, the emptying, where we realize how like unnatural it is to kind of hibernate alone in that way. Like, of course, we all need to resource, but to learn to be with each other in a way that is gentler and softer and stiller and quieter, sometimes grittier is a really important part of how we're going to navigate the world that we're in from here. I've done some really good winters of late, especially thanks to lockdowns, which forced me not to go to India over the winter, and to get to really be in that beauty of seeing how much sunshine there still can be during winter and how much life there still is in nature, and to have that excitement of seeing something appearing out of the soil for the first time that you've seen it. If you walk the same bit of land, like it's a really, really beautiful experience. But it's also like, even though I was born in England and I've lived in England like most of my life, I think there's something in my bones that just doesn't understand being cold. And no amount of life in England has worn that out of me. And the part of India that my family's from is extremely hot. Like it has a season that's so hot like that I can't even be in India during that time. I feel like I can't breathe, it's so hot. And my family there are like, yeah, you should probably stay home because you'll get sick just from being out in that kind of heat. And the first time I went during that season, I was like, no, I'll be fine. And then I was like, oh, okay, I understand. My parents came to England in the 70s, and my grandmother came once for a year when my brother was born, and she found the experience of wintering so awful. She never came back to England again. And so she didn't come when I was born to be with me, because it was the coldness, not just of the weather, but also that everyone just disappeared into their houses. Then that coldness of what I often find in British culture, that, I'm fine. And so you're like, well, you don't seem fine, but why are you saying you're fine? And so that kind of coldness of not really being able to get to what's real and what's present. And so she said she'd never come back to England again. So I'm always slightly sad at winter. But it's a really beautiful thing to be on this land. And for me also, like going into cold water, like all of these things have been really important initiations of loving this land that I find myself on more and more. And yeah, it's taken some deeper kind of resilient training, because I can feel it to be unnatural in some ways. And to be able to like honor like what the coldness brings, and not needing to default towards comfort, and like wintering not needing to be a thing of like overeating and, you know, lots of TV and the heating turned up really high, but actually to be able to be really present with it. I'd love you to all share a song. Would you like to?
Yeah. Let's do it. I heard a bird sing in the dark of December, a magical thing, and sweet to remember. We are nearer to spring than we were in September. I heard a bird sing in the dark. I heard a bird sing in the dark of December, a magical thing, and sweet to remember. We are nearer to spring than we were in September. I heard a bird sing in the dark. I heard a bird sing in the dark of December, a magical thing, and sweet to remember. We are nearer to spring than we were in September. I heard a bird sing in the dark. That was a song with words from a poem by Oliver Herford and adapted into a song by Rebecca Bales Dunford, and then adapted again by one of our wonderful wintering participants, Natalie Fay. So thank you to all of those for bringing that beautiful song into the depth of our winter and giving us that glimpse of spring waiting round the corner.
Thank you. So beautiful to hear the voices, and that also being a powerful thing when we come together and we sing. Cultures have done it all over the world throughout time, and somehow it's easy to forget how important it is. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying this episode, please do get more involved. You can do this by joining our membership, Presence Collective, where we explore deeper how to create beauty in the mess. And you can find details of our experiences such as Reclaim Your Intuition, beautiful leadership mentoring, and our in-person retreats. By joining in and being an active member of this community, you support the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all, so we can stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Other ways that you can connect into the ecosystem is by sharing these episodes with those in your life and dropping us a note from time to time. Head to allthatweare.org to get involved. We'll go back round, closing the circle, with still so much to share. And I'm really interested in where being in a closer relationship with wintering has taken you, what it's transformed within you and within your life, and how you feel it has like some capacity in everything that we're facing to connect us deeper to what we need to be connected to. And if there's any favorite moments that you want to share of winter and how we remember winter, what becomes possible in winter?
So I've always loved winter. Like, I think it is my favorite season. I'm a shepherd's daughter. I grew up on the land, and yeah, winter has never been my problem. Like spring and summer, I've always found more difficult. And so what's been interesting with the wintering process is how it's changed my relationship to the rest of the year. So one of the things I noticed was when we had our final session, which was on Imbolc, so that's the very beginning of February, and we talked about Bridget, because Bridget is, she's an Irish saint, and she is also many other things. And I learned a lot about Bridget when I was preparing for that day. And one of the things I learned was about her as a figure of ambiguity and of how she represented, yes, new life, but also new life coming at a time when the world was still dark and cold. And so there was something there that's both a celebration and, you know, there's a bit of a danger, and it's not quite time. And I think for me, that really summed up how I felt about that early spring and January as well, that it was often a time of new intentions where we're supposed to have all the visions we want for the year ahead. And yet it's a time of tiredness and darkness. And traditionally, I never had those visions in January. And I'd kind of try and crank the resolutions out of me, like kind of dive down into myself and be like, somewhere there's the clarity for the year. And so in this process, it was really affirming to be like, no, of course not. January is not a time for that. Let's get to February, and then actually let's be slow about that. Let's let things grow from under the ground. It's a much more natural time of the year, February, March, even April, to start to have new shoots budding in the world. So there was something about going deep into wintering that scaffolded me being through a part of the year which traditionally I've found harder. And it meant that I have not started the year with the panic, I think, that would have come from not wintering well at the end of the year that has just finished. And so as everyone's described, like December is often a mad month of so much happening and of celebration and work. And by the time you get to the end of it, everyone's on their knees. And actually not doing that has meant that this year has a very different quality. Like there is still spaciousness. The spaciousness of winter is somehow present, even though it is very warm and the sky is blue and there are leaves on the trees. And one of the reflections we had during the wintering process was that perhaps one way of looking at the whole year is as a preparation for winter. The growing, the budding, the blooming, the harvesting is all about getting us through the darkness. And again, that's just a very different perspective than I've carried previously. Some of my favorite bits. There was a day when it was like particularly inclement outside and everyone was exhausted. And we ended up spending most of it in the yurt by the fire, resting and doing kind of collective dreaming and singing and making lanterns. And I was feeling really ill that day. And it was just such a wonder to be able to doze by a fire. And it literally felt like, this is the world I want to be living in, this coziness, this care we all had for each other. And yeah, like the glow of togetherness was really, really beautiful. So I loved that. I loved some of the silliness. Like there was, as we've discussed already, there was a lot of laughter. And that was partly from all of us trying things that were new for us. And I think partly because we had created the trust between us to, I don't know, just to be really silly. And I feel like in my life, at least, there aren't enough spaces just to be silly anymore. Yeah, really appreciated that. And something which feels a bit of a zooming out again. I don't know if this is too much, but I'm going to share it. One of the things, if we're looking at building more life-giving worlds, is changing the deep narratives at the core of our lives. And one of those deep narratives that is so destructive is this idea of anthrosupremacy, that we as humans are superior to all other things and that we get to dominate all other things. The more life-giving deep narrative is that of interbeing. Like, how are we together as part of the web of life? And what does it mean to live that story? Wintering really helped me embody that story, because now when I come back to this land, like I feel a sense of excitement when I find certain places where I spent time. Like before we started the podcast, we went on a bit of a walk around the land and Jess walked past a hawthorn and she was like, oh yes, the hawthorn. Like I spent some time with this hawthorn and I say hello to it every time I pass. And so now when we come back to this land, we greet each other, but then there are all these other species that we greet that feel like part of a family. And I definitely feel much more part of a family of quite familiar kin from other species now, having spent this long time on the land through the seasons. And we've already spoke a bit about wintering doesn't have to be related to a particular season of the year. How the author Catherine May talks about we will all have periods of our life where we will be wintering, maybe not through our own choice. We may be wintering through illness or caring responsibilities. And there were definitely people in the group who would share that although winter had finished, some of them were going to choose to continue wintering, or they could feel that wintering was coming on them and that they felt more equipped to be in that. And that makes me wonder for all of us, like, how can we all build our capacities to be in the winters of our lives, whether that is from November to March, or whether that is through months or years when winter comes upon us.
Thanks, Ella. I used to be an avid New Year's resolution maker that would also alliterate. I used to get really into those. And then I really realised that, that was part of the business as usual urgency. Everything has to be decided for your year ahead on January the 1st. And I loved the ambiguity of January this year, the soupiness, the getting comfortable with uncertainty and incoherence. And I think that's what we as a planet are going to face more and more. We need to get comfortable with discomfort and uncertainty. After burnout, I also decided I was going to just focus on using creativity to cultivate the fresh new shoots of a more regenerative future. After working on the big problems, how can I use creativity in service for grassroots projects that were building a better future? But I've come full circle now to realizing that it's not just about the new growth. I think this is it's a narrative in our culture that we're just focused on growth and like technological solutions and progress. And we're forgetting the endings and the depth needed right now. I've been working on a project called Tending to Endings, which is an exploration of how do we have better conversations about death and endings. And this wintering journey has been a real part of that exploration, thinking about how do we compost, when might we bonfire, how can we use like the energy of the wormery to think about these times, and thinking about what kind of endings do these different systems and organizations and processes that no longer serve us, how can we better hospice them? So not just the endings in our own lives, but the institutions and the mindsets that need composting, that need bonfiring, or maybe mulching, or maybe fallowing. Like Ella was speaking before about the wood needed for a winter fire. We actually need to be starting the cultivation of the winter fire in the summer with the coppicing of the wood and the seasoning, that each season supports the next season that follows. And we kind of live for the summer and we wish the winter away. But I'm realizing now how important it is to slow down in winter in community, to process in order to then move on to the next cycle. And on a fractal level, thinking about the systems that are collapsing right now, the need for us to gather in community and process, but also be able to move through that spiral, to notice the life that is happening in the cracks, to know what to mulch, what to leave fallow, and what to let die. I think some of my favourite moments from the wintering have been regathering around a fire after a sit spot, spending some time with the other beings of the sand and with ourselves, and just being still and noticing, and coming back together and sharing what you experienced. And it'd always be such profound things that people would have experienced. It's such a gift to share that and to witness that in other people. It's made me rethink how I work as well. So this winter I decided to take on less and take it slower, say no more often, and have a gentler start to the year. It's also made me think more about endings in a project sense as well. How do we not just rush on to the next thing, but sit and learn and compost and take forth the learnings? And I really love winter now. I'm already excited for the next wintering, which I would never be excited about winter before. I've always wanted summer to last as long as possible, but I've learnt to really love it. I think it's quite unusual for a group of people of different walks of life, different backgrounds, coming together and just processing life together. I'm part of other communities and in Bristol where I live, often united by a hobby or an interest. But to come to a place that is just united by we need to reconnect with ourselves and to the world around us and process that together. I think that's quite unusual.
One of the favourite moments I'm just remembering, it was a Wednesday and we were sat around the fire, just checking in, gazing around at the trees and welcoming each other and eating scrumptious food. And it just felt so rebellious. You know, the dominant expectation of being productive and being efficient and achieving things. And it just felt like such a liberating act of rebellion to do nothing, or what others might perceive to be nothing, but actually is just so rich in terms of all the many layers and different forms that emerge from the process of wintering. Ella was talking about deep narratives of our culture, and progress is such a deep narrative. And I know friends of mine, they may know who they are, they may not, would maybe say that, you know, stopping and regathering around fires and practicing rituals and the simplicity of what we were doing is maybe looking backwards, and it's not progress, but it felt radically progressive and liberating, I think, to me. So I loved that side of it. And one of the things I noticed was, I was saying earlier, like the busyness of winter always felt like a ramping up. And for the first time this winter, it felt like there was a portal of perception that opened up in parallel to what was happening in our business as usual society of busyness, of just having this window into the land and what was happening in nature. And I'm 53 years old, and I don't think I've ever had that awareness of the land during the winter because of being so closed away in our homes and in our lives. That feels like a real gift, which I'm really looking forward to just nurturing and growing. And that makes me think of one of the other themes for me, which was of emergence. So we developed a mantra between us of trust emergence. In terms of hosting the spaces, we started off with quite a structured plan and naturally thinking through what we wanted to do together. And it became more and more profoundly simple as we went through the experience. And, you know, maybe you have to go through that complexity before you get to the profoundly simple of trusting in the magic and emergence that arises through ceremony and ritual, that we actually have the capacity to create together in the moment. And that too feels like such a gift because we have so few ceremonies and rituals in our lives, and such a joy and so much laughter experienced as we created those together and with the group. Yes, so memories of portals without, it probably sound a bit odd if I elaborated on that now, but the idea of portals reminds me of my parallel window opening and how those ideas emerged from others in the groups. And we ended up creating a ceremonial sort of ritual for moving through a portal, which was both meaningful and hilarious at the same time. And there was sort of the unexpected, really, during this January and February strange time, as Ella was describing a minute ago. I was unexpectedly going through a phase in my life of needing to let go of a constellation of business relationships, which I hadn't expected to be letting go of. And what I discovered in myself was a deeper capacity, I believe, enabled by the continual returning to the land and to this community and this practice of stopping and letting go. What I was able to do was, in the midst of the grief and sense of loss of this reorganizing of our relationships, to really just be still with it and to allow it, not trying to rush towards a solution or an answer, but to make space within me for the sense of grief and loss and all of the emotion that I was holding and we as a group were. That felt like a really new experience for me, and it was deeply connected to the wintering experience. And that makes me super hopeful for how we collectively are going to discover within ourselves the capacities to handle and hold the immense grief and loss as the systems and ways of being and living together that we're familiar with unravel and change shape and die away. That we have this deep well of resource, but that crucially it's discovered in connection with others and not on our own. So yeah, that feels like a really big takeaway for me. We were never designed to face grief and loss individually. Designed isn't the right word, but so that feels precious and a deep insight. One of the other favorite moments for me was, again, it felt like a bit of a counterbalance to being deeply connected in nature. It was when we actually closed the door of the yurt and nested together for what was pretty much the whole day. Some of us even fell asleep and we were just surrounded by beautiful stories, meaningful conversation, creativity, nourishing food, warmth, and connection. And it was just one of those moments where you just realize the simplicity of the threads that we've perhaps dropped in our culture. And yet, actually, they are all around us if we choose to pick them up. Yeah, that was just a particularly beautiful moment for me. So many to choose from. And I think for me, these kind of threads of coming together in community, in connection with nature, trusting in our innate capacities to steady ourselves for what is already going on in the world and whatever may be coming to us in future, is something that is feeding into a continuation of wintering, but also some of the other work that I do around a regathering event, which has similar themes. And I do really feel that these are some of the experiences and moments around the edges and in the cracks of our current ways of living in our culture where some new possibilities can emerge.
It feels like there's so much to say because there was just so many threads of insight and wisdom and joy and connection that all wove themselves together through this last winter. And it's tricky to draw out particular things that, to share more than others. I want to, I think, reflect on that part of the winter that some have spoken to here, the January where we're encouraged to make New Year's resolutions and set our intentions and have strong certainty about where we're going and how we're going to do it. This question that came up a lot in wintering, how can we live well in these times of everything that's going on with the world, in these times where it feels as if there's a lot of darkness, that we still need to be fully alive in our days. And I think of the many, many people I know and the many, many, many people I don't know personally who know that how things are for them now is not how they want it to be, is not meeting their needs or our collective needs. And yet there's a sort of a frozenness of not being able to change something because we don't know what we're changing it to. We don't know how to get to the thing that we actually want or that actually need. January and February kind of remind us that there's this time in winter where everything falls away and we kind of end up in a kind of a nakedness of not having everything that we were holding on to. And it's in that emptiness or nakedness or void that the new possibilities can begin to imagine themselves under the ground of our lives or deep inside the quieter parts of ourselves. So it was really interesting this winter because it was like learning to feel that juicy, uncomfortable, but also like mysteriously exciting void space of not knowing like what the next certain steps are or how to reach an outcome, but being in it together and kind of allowing weird and wonderful mystery and unexpected things to unfold, like allowing ourselves to be surprised by what comes up in that space when we don't intentionally fill it with lots of things that we think are going to work well. I often find when people come here to the land that they reflect towards the end of their time, I nearly didn't make it. There's so many demands in life. It's so busy. There's so many things that feel like they're urgent and more important to do. And coming here feels just a bit like slacking off or a bit too difficult to make space for. And then they kind of pause and they say, I'm just so glad that I did it. It's never the wrong decision to come. Like I just didn't even know that I needed this so much until I felt it, until I experienced it. It feels more precious and well spent time than any of those long list of things that I thought I should be doing and that I couldn't get away from. And I really, really feel strongly what you reflected, Amisha, about daily life feeling progressively harder as systems get more and more crunchy, as life gets more expensive, and it's hard to get food on the table, it's hard to pay the rent, it's hard to meet all the needs of the home and the family and the juggle. And that is such a massive challenge in our modern context for what we have noticed that we've benefited so much from here, which is that feeling of building community together and allowing time and space for things to unfold rather than rushing through things. So I do think it's really, really difficult. And also we need to find some ways to carve out those times for ourselves and for each other to build that community and to listen to those quieter voices inside ourselves, experience what can emerge from that like wisdom of the void when things have dropped away, when the noise is not crowding out the mystery. Thinking about what Ella so beautifully said about feeling like being in a family of kin from other species, I want to bring in the grandparents, because the grandparents are who we call a very special pair of oak trees up on the hill who hold space for a lot of the important community times that we spend together here, and in particularly welcoming people and celebrating together, feeling their amazing space holding capacity for everything that we do. And thinking about oak trees, I just feel very constantly inspired by oak trees. And I think about our lives, our individual lives and our collective kind of societies and how, we have all these structures and systems, and we have our work and we have our economies, and we have all these things that are like the kind of branches and leaves and, the things that we get from those, like the leaves and the fruits and the flowers that we get from all of those systems. And when we want to change things, if we're in our busyness, if we're in our summer mode, we're kind of looking at what we're going to do about the branches, what we're going to do about the fixing problems with the leaves when they're looking a bit peaky. And what's inviting about winter for me is when all of those leaves and flowers and fruits have all dropped off and the tree is bare and it's taken all of its resources deep within, what is going to feed any transformation in the branches and flowers and fruits of that tree is what's in the soil that its roots are nested in. And all of these really fun experimental things that we might have done with the compost and the soil and the mulch and the mud and the mess and stuff over winter, it was really a way to remember that it's in the soil, in all of the mess down there, that the life for the future is made and fed. And that is all born of like the connections in that soil. There's so many connections, all the fungal threads spreading and connecting everything, all of the microorganisms in there, all of the seeds that are being kept safe under the soil, ready to grow. And I don't think we can change the tangible substance of our lives by thinking really hard about stuff we can change in practical ways and in mind-driven ways. What's really going to give us the transformation that many of us long for, both individually and as a humanity, is looking into the soil of what everything is growing out of. And a healthy soil is full of connection, is worth taking time for. It's worth paying attention to. And although when you look into the soil, a lot of what you might see is kind of scary. It's like dark and creepy and crawly and dirty and sticky, but there's so much good stuff in there. And I've actually realized with that winter, where all of the awesome things that have been doing all their beautiful, colourful growing through the year fall down into the soil, it's actually like quite exciting to watch what happens when all of those like dying things meet all of the creepy, crawly, dark, mysterious underworld things and do their kind of magic together. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't feel scared of winter anymore. It used to make me really, really, I just used to get so sad. I would feel a lot of depression, particularly in that January, February phase when there's less of the hectic celebration and, you know, fairy lights and everything. And now I think it's my favorite bit. I'm actually excited to kind of feel what might come out of the void. Humanity is, you know, it's pretty dark and scary, and there's a lot of creepy, crawly things going on. And also there's this potent possibility. It's a kind of time to be alive when surprising things could happen. So yeah, I want to finish on one of my favorite moments, which was one of our participants coming back from spending some time with the land and being so surprised and delighted by this conversation that he'd just had with a dead or a dying dock stalk. And that he'd, you know, shared, you know, some quite personal, meaningful things, been really surprised by how affecting that was for him and how well listened to he'd felt, and how actually you can feel quite well listened to by a small plant, sometimes even better than by another human. So yeah, if we embrace winter and all of its possibilities, then we could be really surprised by how transformative whatever emerges can be.
Thanks, Sal. It's been beautiful to hear everyone share. Thanks, everyone. Just that journey through those different memories. And I think, yeah, the thing that really comes up for me when I think about what we've created with wintering is how quietly radical it is. You know, it's not big, it's not shouty, it's not shiny, but it's just deeply countercultural and so needed. And it's quiet and it's slow and it's all the things that we yearn for but somehow feel like we can't have. Laura Storm, does a lot of work in regenerative business and leadership, and then she talks about the fact that it's not, when it comes to solving the world's biggest challenges, it's not about a lack of technological solutions or just solutions generally. You know, we have technologies that can help us move forward, and we have many amazing ideas that we could adopt, but it's actually the collective fear of death and wintering that is stopping us. Because if we were to go towards some of those new ideas, it would mean the end of some others. And a bit like what Heather was talking about with the tending to endings, you know, how we don't, it's all about how we tend to those endings and allow those endings to happen. And so wintering is, in a small way, I think, just us getting comfortable with that energy of endings, and we get to practice it every year. Stephen Jenkinson, he says that ritual and ceremony are the ways we mark threshold moments in our lives, and they're like punctuation marks. So it's like if our life is just one long series of events with no punctuation marks, it's hard to understand how, it's hard to kind of get a measure of it. But once we start marking moments and occasions, whether it's a new home or a marriage or a birth or a death, we have rituals and ceremonies around those times, and we have the big ones still in place. But I think we have opportunities at any moment throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year, to have more of these rituals and ceremonies to mark and to understand where we are. And of course, a lot of us observe the Celtic Wheel of the Year with the 8 festivals, which we align our wintering process with, at least a quarter of that, because we started at Samhain and ended at Imbolc, and we had the winter solstice in the middle. A few years now that I've been observing these festivals or these moments in the year has just brought so much richness to my life and so much meaning, and just noticing what's happening around me. I feel so much in more connection with nature through that process, and doing that together in community is just such a gift. And I really just wish for more people to be able to access that and to think about how they can honor that wintering journey. We have this, the other thing I've heard as well about ceremonies is ceremonies can also help us practice for death, because death is the ultimate ending. And we all will one day not be here anymore. But how do we practice getting comfortable with that energy of endings in our lives? And we have this opportunity every winter. Also, I work with John Young's 8 Shields model, which is a framework for nature connection, which is based on, but not derivative of, kind of indigenous wisdom, but it's a very co-created framework. And Sally as well is a very close advocate of 8 Shields, and we work with it a lot in our program here. And the winter or the north orientation of that cycle, which would align with the winter solstice and winter, it's all about elderhood and wisdom. And just the energy of the time of winter is about elderhood, about dreaming, and really imagining that next part of the cycle. And so taking time to dream, taking time to think, taking time to imagine and conjure up what we might wish for that next part of the cycle, that essential step that we often miss. And like lots of you have said here, it's not about making those New Year's resolutions and having to act on them straight away. It's just staying in that dreaming state for a bit longer and letting those dreams and ideas fully mature and fully take shape. The other piece is about, for me, the thing that I think about a lot, which is this rebalancing of the masculine and feminine energies, you know, not to be confused with men and women, but more about the kind of energy of the less explored, of the yin rather than the yang. And we've talked a lot about this kind of the dominant culture that we're in, which is more obviously a patriarchal system, which has more of the masculine traits and linear systems, and really coming back to this cyclical nature and connection and community and these things that are less explored or less developed. This feels like a very powerful exploration and really central to what we're doing here with wintering. I think about the favorite moments. I think a few people have mentioned the time inside, paradoxically, was kind of one of the best times. I remember opening the door to the yurt, and I was a bit late to join the lunch, and everyone had already ensconced themselves on the floor, and there was hot soup being served out and huge chunks of fresh bread and big slathers of butter and cheerful conversation and merry noise and just contented sounds and it was a contented group of people who were very happy to be amongst each other in that time, and that feeling of warmth and stepping through a door and into a room like that is just a joy. It felt like coming home, and it was something we just created, and felt very privileged to be part of it. I think this idea as well of the way we were coming back 5 times over 3 months. I've been on a lot of retreats. I run retreats, but that idea of kind of running a retreat over 3 months in day-long installments feels like a really beautiful way to lead to more integration in our lives, and it feels more accessible for those of us with families and for whom it can be difficult to take 5 days away overnight. So just having that where it's more woven into the rhythm of life. So I feel like more spaces like that would be so welcome. And being together physically. One of my teachers, Kimberly Ann Johnson, she works a lot with somatics and she does a lot with nervous system work. And she said that since the pandemic, there's been a huge change in the way that we show up in physical spaces, because since the lockdowns, a lot of people have become less comfortable with just being in physical space with people, because we're doing that less. We're not going to the office. We're not going to physical places. And a lot of people aren't, when they come shoulder to shoulder with other individuals, they get anxious or they just don't feel as comfortable. And I think it is noticeable how that has shifted. And I think for me, just being in a space shoulder to shoulder, sitting right next to someone by the fire and feeling people's bodies and feeling people's energy, just feels so essential at this time as we explore what it is to be human and live in this time and live in this confusing, overwhelming, unraveling time. And just being together body to body and sharing together the highs and the lows and the joy and the sorrow and the grief and all of those things, and all of those things being welcome, that feels essential.
Thank you. There's something that I want to speak to a little bit around what Ella said about how in life wintering journeys can, they can be long, and most people have them. Not everyone has them. Some people have quite a lot of them, and there's a systemic aspect of it. Like if you're affected more by the systems of oppression that we have in this world, then you're going to experience more winter in the grander sense, not in the weather sense. And when it's winter here in England, it's summer somewhere else. And that, unfortunately, is a metaphor for capitalism as well. And that there's always like pain and grief and challenge and difficulty that some are going through, that's allowing for the joy and the beauty and the light and the magic that others are experiencing. And that's the world that we've kind of set up. And I just want that anyone that's listening that's in one of those periods that feels like a long, dark winter and one where you can't see the end. Because when it's a calendar one, we know, okay, like we're going to get to, March and things start to change. And when it's a life one, we don't always know. And all the things that we're talking about, genocide, like these things then live on, and they live on in people and in families, they become us. And I don't have a magic answer for what it is to live in the deep, deep winter. I've been in a winter for so far, like this one's been like 5 years. Got particularly dark like 2 or 3 years ago. And there's no magic answer. There is that thing that you said, Sally, about the soil. The soil's always there, and there's so much nourishment in the soil. So there's always something somewhere that we can use to anchor ourselves and to bring ourselves into that connection. even when life circumstances or even states of being separate us from what feels possible. And I found that a really simple way of being, of acknowledging where there's beauty, knowing how radical and beautiful it is to tend to the preciousness and the tenderness of our own hearts. And no matter what we're experiencing in life, to use it as an invitation to deepen in our like power of love, and the love that we can experience and the love that we can share. And often that does happen in those dark spaces, that we have to be more resourced by something else that exists outside of these systems and of worldliness that we've created as humans, but that lives in another place. And it's another place that's so familiar to so many cultures around the world, and also ancient cultures everywhere. It's both resource, but it's also more reciprocal than that, that us being in the winter, being present in those harder parts of life, that we're giving something. And that gift is necessary in the world. It's compost. It's needed for what else can happen and can birth through. And I know sometimes it's easy to forget that, especially in cultures where people want everyone to be happy all the time, and there can be so much discomfort with that that's challenging, and that doesn't have a cure. That isn't just going to be better in a few weeks or a few months or even a few years. And I feel that is something that we have to learn to be with better in ourselves, to live with that kind of messiness, and also to be with each other more deeply in things that we might not even really understand. But to know that we're all having this collective shared experience, that it's winter somewhere, it's summer somewhere else, that there's an opposite that's playing out all the time. And how can we resource the opposite? And it's not like a one-sided thing. We've mentioned genocide a few times in this conversation, and I get a lot of my strength from watching people in Gaza just keep going, just keep loving, just keep feeling. And I sometimes think, how are you doing that? It's been 1.5 years. It's been a long time. How are you still doing that? And it shows us that we're so much more strong, resilient, and loving than we know. We learn so much about ourselves in the darkness, that the shadow isn't just, it's not bad, it's stuff we just don't understand fully. And the more that we excavate that darkness within ourselves and each other and our communities, and we allow there to be space for that kind of wintering, the brighter the spring and the summer can be. Thank you all so much for coming and sharing in this space, and creating this for people to listen to all over the world, and also for tending to the land and community here, and creating a space that has been so welcoming and caring and connective. Shall we sing another song to close?
What am I rushing towards? What am I rushing for? What am I rushing towards? What am I rushing for? Slow down and savor. Slow down and savor. What am I rushing towards? What am I rushing for? What am I rushing towards? What am I rushing for? Slow down and savor. Slow down and savor.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, join our experiences, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast. And so it's made possible with you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership, retreats, and experiences. Share the episode with your friends and do drop us a note from time to time. Please hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so that others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silos through borders, timelines, or polarity. That in each and every moment, all that we are is here.